might have mentioned at some point that I retired about a year ago, and but I still have a status at the University of St. Francis as a what they call emeritus faculty. So I still have an office. It happens to be number 259, and I have an email address. In case you don't already know what that is, there it is, wpryor@sf.edu. And I even have a telephone on my desk with an extension. So I get to play sometimes with the cool science stuff at St. Francis. And this is the outside of the building where I spent, 20 or so years of my life while I was full-time faculty. It used to be just this end over here. That's Ackett's Hall of Science. You can't even really make out the name there, but it's Ackett's Hall of Science. And the new wing went in a few years ago. That's this part over here with a little different name. They're one building. You walk without getting rain on your head from one end to the other. And it's in this new wing that we have our microscope room. So you enter the main doors here, and then we'll walk in and see where that room is located. So just after you enter the main entrance, over to the left is this big window showing off our cool microscope stuff that's in the room. We have a confocal microscope that uses lasers to image tissues and so forth, and some other instrumentation, as well as the scanning electron microscope, and that's what we'll look at next. So you have to go through a couple of locked doors to get to this point. This is the entrance to the imaging lab, and you walk in here, and there's the scanning electron microscope, or fondly known as the SEM. And this thing has been a real workhorse over the last 10-15 years. Had quite a few students work on it doing various projects. And it's really simple to use. There's only a couple of rules that you have to obey when you're using this thing. One is that the specimen has to be able to fit on this little plate. And it can't be too high, so it has to be able to fit in the hole, right, without damaging any of the internal components. The specimen also has to be dry, so you can't have moisture in it before you put it in there, because the instrument pulls a vacuum on that chamber, and any gases or water or anything that might come off of it would cause a malfunction. So it has to be dry. Well, this is decidedly not dry, what I'm showing you here. This is a little aquarium that I have at my house. And it's about a gallon in total volume, including the filter that's underneath it. This little aquarium has some snails in it that over last winter laid eggs and had babies. So I had quite a few little tiny snails, some of which unfortunately crawled out of the aquarium and got onto the outside of it and died. But what I did get out of that was some shells that are in really good condition, that I thought, well, that'd be kind of a fun thing to look at in the SEM. Here's a little better close-up of or a couple of those snails that inhabit that aquarium. Anyway, here's some of those dry shells that I talked about. And there's another one here. These are just empty, nice and dry. And the first thing I have to do before I put these in the SEM is to mount them onto a piece of metal. I like to use coins, so this one here happens to be a quarter, so it's exactly 25 cents. And there's a piece of double stick carbon tape right here that the snail shells are fastened to. You know, one side's stuck to the coin, one side's stuck to the snail shell, and you'll notice that they have a almost like a gold appearance to them, and that's because they've been coated with gold. And to make that happen, well, the protocol is actually pretty simple. Like I said, you stick them to a coin, and then I put the coin with the snails attached onto this metal plate of a device called a sputter coater. This one's trade name is Smart Coater. Anyway, you put them on there, and you take this glass, basically it's a jar that's opened on either end, and you put that on top of here, and you lower the lid down, and you push the button, and it basically spray paints a very, very, very thin layer of gold on the specimen, the coin, the tape, and all of it. And here's a picture of some 3 snail shells right before they go into the chamber mounted on their quarter. The reason that they have to be coated with gold is because calcium carbonate, which is what the shells are made of, doesn't conduct electricity very well, but gold does. And since we're going to be using electrons rather than light to view these specimens, it's important to give that electricity, those electrons, a place to go once they've hit the specimen, and the gold allows that to occur. So it conducts the electrons away from the chamber. So without getting too much into the technicalities, what I am able to do then with the SEM is to create very high quality, high resolution, and sometimes even very high magnification images of whatever I put in there. In this case, these snail shells, and they're quite small. I mean, you saw them sitting there on a quarter, and the magnification that I used for this these 2 images was as low as the instrument will go. So here's an error bar, a scale bar of 1 millimeter. So it shows you how small these things are. I could, focus on some tiny little feature and blow it up to, extreme magnifications, but I don't really need to do that for what I'm trying to accomplish here, which is basically qualitative work, looking at what species we have and some of the important morphological features. In that previous image, what I had really were 2 pictures because the snail wouldn't fit in the field of view. So all I did here was just take those 2 pictures and tried to overlay them so that you could have a more or less complete picture of this snail shell. And here's a second one from that series of 3 that's been edited a little bit so that you have an appreciation for the whole organism. And just for the sake of completeness, here's the 3rd one. One thing I would point out, even at this very low magnification with the SEM, you can really pick out some details. These little lines here really just jump out at you. So it's really a powerful way of being able to visualize morphological aspects of a mollusk shell. Well, the SEM certainly has some advantages over light microscopy, um, but it also has some disadvantages. One of which is, um, as you saw, it's necessary to more or less glue the specimen down to a surface, and that has a distinct disadvantage. Once you stick it down, what if you want to look at the other side? It's really difficult to flip it over once you've stuck it to the tape and coated it with gold. I mean, it's possible, but it's just a little bit beyond what I want to do sometimes. Another thing that we lose with the SEM is color, because electrons essentially don't have color. Light has color. Electrons SEM images are always in black and white and shades of gray. So that's another thing you kind of lose out on. So I took some sediment some time ago, back in July, from the mussel bed, and my goal was to see if I could find any baby mussels, juveniles, that were down in the substrate, down in the sediment. And I brought them back to the house. I sieved them through a standard size sieve with some water, and I dried them out, and then picked through them, and I got a whole bunch of little tiny mollusk shells to look at. So here's what you see when you look through the microscope. As I said, you get color. So here's one that's distinctly different, almost translucent in color, from one that has maybe some more mineralizations, more calcium carbonate going on. Also, excitingly, there's definitely some bivalves in this sample. But sticking with snails, here's a magnification of one of those gastropods. Very nice detail. Again, not an extremely high magnification, down there in the 20-30 range or so, but pretty good, even compared to the scanning electron microscope. Good old light microscopy can do the job. One of those bivalves was actually still articulated. That is to say, both of the valves were still together, nothing in them, but it was still they were still attached to one another. And boy, that kind of looks like a mussel, doesn't it? In this view, we've got 3 bivalve shells. Here we are. We're looking at them from the other side. And this is something we wouldn't be able to do so easily in the SEM, but we can do it with the light microscope. And when I really get in there and I start looking at details, when I magnify and I look in here, I see, wow, that looks like a lateral tooth maybe, and that might be a lateral tooth there. I don't know. Are these baby mussels? These juvenile unionid mussels? Or perhaps are they fingernail clams? Well, to this point, I really haven't done much with juveniles. Purportedly, they spend the first couple of years of their existence after they fall off the fish buried in the sediment. And I haven't done a whole lot of sediment work. So honestly, I really don't know what I'm looking at. I see bivalves, yeah, and they're really little, yeah, but are they baby unionid mussels? I don't know at this point. So what do you do when you don't know something these days? You Google it. So I looked up a little bit on the internet to see what I could find on the quick. And I found this article by Barnhart back in 2006 where he'd succeeded in producing some juveniles in a captive situation. So here's a micrograph with transmitted light through some live juvenile relatives of my mussels. These are a different species, but it's hard to really make out much. You know, I'm looking at shells here, empty shells, and these are live specimens, and I can't really see the teeth very clearly. I can see, you know, the guts and some other things, but that doesn't really help me a whole lot. So here's a picture from a very recent article in 2001 that I ran across, and it has some nice images of the umbo region on the inside of the shell, so I can actually see the teeth. And it looks to me like we've got some lateral teeth both in front of and behind the umbo. Also superficially, the outside of these guys looks pretty similar to what I'm seeing in those specimens that I pulled out of the substrate here. Like I said, I've been working with adults for quite a while, and this is a random example. Here's the umbo of a Lampsillus silicoidea. There's two pseudocardinal teeth here, and then a couple of lateral teeth behind or posterior to the pseudocardinal teeth. You'll note there's no lateral teeth anterior to the pseudocardinal teeth. So that's what I'm used to seeing. That's a typical unionid situation where you have pseudocardinals and then lateral teeth that are posterior to that. And going back to our image again, taking this one in the lower left, again, there's the umbo. And then it looks to me like we've got lateral teeth here and lateral teeth there. That looks to me more like a fingernail clam than a unionid. So we'll see. I'll do a little more digging in the literature, and I'll get back to you on that. Something to look forward to. Well, to sum up, my little cores did in fact yield some mollusk shells, both snails and bivalves, and their identities are something to pursue in the future. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye.